Right. Let's move on because the start is also defining the NFL season for us in many ways. It turns out the New England Patriots are the best team in football and we should just give them the Super Bowl now. Mike Carlson, good morning to you.
Good morning. That's one way of looking at it, but of course, week one in the NFL is National Jump to Conclusions Week. It's always a dangerous thing to do. But it was actually a really entertaining week one in a lot of ways, although I thought particularly sloppy in a lot of games, and I think this is partly the result of less contact in practices in preseason, but also more and more teams holding out their better players in preseason. So you saw a lot of sort of rusty offenses and a lot of bad tackling. And so, I hesitate to anoint anybody at this stage of the season.
We'll talk about the Patriots and Antonio Brown in a moment, but I want to start with the other big off-season hype story, which was the Cleveland Browns, who, coming into this, were supposed to be everybody's second favourite team, and were supposed to be a team that were ready to steamroll sides on both sides of the ball, and they got absolutely annihilated by Tennessee last night. Apparently 1955 was the last time that the Cleveland Browns gave away so many penalties in a single game. So what the hell went wrong for them?
Well, a couple of things, really, but penalties was a big part of it, because indiscipline was also a story around the league. In fact, this week there were 3 players, I think, ejected from games, one of them being Greg Robinson of the Browns, who they just had brought in to play left tackle, brought him back actually to play left tackle. With him out, their offensive line pretty much collapsed. And was vulnerable to the Titans' pass rush. Baker Mayfield was rushed a lot and threw 3 interceptions. It was always sort of premature to jump on that Cleveland bandwagon. Tennessee, I called this game a toss-up. Obviously, it wasn't in the end a toss-up, but the Browns were never going to run away with things, and I think their offense is still a work in progress. Landry didn't look impressive. Odell Beckham was held under control quite nicely, and the Tennessee secondary played really well. Byard had an interception. Logan Ryan played really well. Malcolm Butler, another ex-Patriot, along with Ryan, had a touchdown interception. They just dominated in the second half, and Cleveland ran out of ideas more than steam.
A couple of other things that I just wanted to kind of wheel through before we do get to the big story, which is obviously the Patriots and Antonio Brown. But Dallas looked really good, a bit of a slow start against the Giants, but then Dak Prescott in this offense looks like he's going to be excellent. They've got a new play caller who seems to be part of that generation of smart young coaches who's going to have an immediate impact.
Yeah, Kellen Moore is the new offensive coordinator. A huge improvement over the head coach, Jason Garrett, or the Clapper, as we call him. Moore played at Boise State. He never had an NFL career except as a backup, but he's got an offense now that takes advantage of the things the Cowboys can do well, not least of which is Zeke Elliott, who, after all the drama about his re-signing, is back. Dak's going to wind up getting a big contract as well. I'm not sure how Jerry Jones pays all these guys and stays under the salary cap, but that's his problem, not mine. They looked really good. The Chiefs looked really good for a good part of the game against Jacksonville, and Jacksonville lost Nick Foles, their new quarterback, early on to a broken collarbone. They've got a rookie called Gardner Minshew. Oddly enough, he played in a system at Washington State, which is not all that different from some of the things that John DeFilippo, their new offensive coordinator, likes to do. He was Foles' quarterback coach in Philadelphia when they went to the Super Bowl and won it. So they were expecting big things from that. Minshew's not that bad a fit, but what will happen is the rest of the NFL will look at him and what he can't do or can't do as well, and they'll stop him later on. And of course, Baltimore simply ran over Miami, which is a huge story on two sides. For Baltimore's, it was the fact that they passed, the Lamar Jackson passed for 5 touchdowns, which I think is only one less than he threw all of last season when he was a run-first quarterback. And for Miami, of course, people are accusing them already of tanking the entire season in order to get the number 1 draft pick, which I think is a bit unfair, but they are in a quote-unquote rebuilding process. And what was most worrying for them is that the strongest part of the team that's left is their secondary, and their secondary was completely shredded in that game.
Yeah, not bad for a running back is what Lamar Jackson said in the aftermath of that. Mike, they say Americans hate draws, so I presume you were crying your eyes out when you saw the Detroit game last night ended in a tie?
Yeah, maybe it's because I've lived over here for so long, but I've made this argument for years about draws, and I remember big games that ended in draws. The prime one being Michigan State against Notre Dame in 1966, where they were ranked 1 and 2 in the college football standings. It was a 10-10 draw. Alabama, who were ranked 3rd with Bear Bryant as the coach, didn't move up in the polls, which to me doesn't surprise you, because if you have a dead heat in 100 meters, the guy in 3rd doesn't get first place because the other 2 guys tied. But Bear Bryant said a tie is like kissing your sister, and from that moment on, Americans have been told they hate ties to the point where they now believe it. In my mind, I would rather see overtime just dropped for the regular season and just use it in playoff games where you have to have a winner.
Yeah.
Because when the guys battle for 60 minutes, they come out even. Okay, it's even, and a team that plays over their heads for 60 minutes doesn't deserve to get beaten necessarily in the overtime. Plus, it makes coaches decide whether they're going to go for the win in regulation or just automatically play for the tie in overtime. Then if they lose in overtime, nobody blames them. But if they take the chance to win the game in regulation, as we saw Mike Vrabel do at Wembley last season, they get pilloried for that. And finally, ties are a great tiebreaker. I hate it when we go down to the playoffs and you've got 3 teams and one of them goes to the playoffs based on the American equivalent of points differential or strength of schedule, when if you had a tie in there, it would quite easily break those ties.
Yeah, it's a good call. We should talk about Antonio Brown, because obviously it is one of the most remarkable stories that anybody's ever seen. Belichick, the conspiracy theories are brilliant, and I enjoy, giving them some extra life and talking them through, but surely not even the great Bill Belichick is the evil mastermind behind what's been going on.
Before we do, let's have a listen to what Belichick said when asked about this yesterday.
Bill, I just wanted to see, do you have any comment on the reports of Antonio Brown?
When will they learn?
That was it.
When will they learn? You do not ask Bill Belichick a yes or no question, because he'll answer you with a no. It's like, if there's an evil mastermind behind that, it's probably Drew Rosenhaus, who's Brown's agent. But, to think that somehow Brown or Rosenhaus or Bill could plan this whole thing out so that he would be released at the right time for the Patriots to sign him, it kind of stretches credulity. I mean, I would not put it past Rosenhaus to call Bill sort of the day before and say, look, something's going to happen. If it is, are you still interested? Because they did offer a first-round draft pick to the Steelers last year, it turns out, for Brown. And Bill probably would have said, yes. I hadn't thought about it much, because I thought the Patriots are so stacked at wide receiver that they wouldn't necessarily jump at the chance for another one. Stupid me. But, you saw the way they tore through Pittsburgh. Josh Gordon had an amazing game for them. So the question becomes, who are they going to cut when they sign Antonio Brown? There's probably 6 guys at the bottom of the roster who are all sweating bullets right now as they wait for Brown to show up in Foxborough. But I was watching Hard Knocks, where the Raiders were the team that was being covered. And I said a couple of weeks ago, I think it was on my Patreon column or maybe on Nat Coombs' show, but I said, John Gruden is the Boris Johnson of the NFL. And he's playing to the cameras all the time. He's telling everybody what they want to hear, whether it has a basis in reality or not. And Boris is probably the only guy who had a worse last week than the Miami Dolphins did. And welcome to Dublin. Gruden, I think Antonio Brown looked around and thought, I've got this deal, but I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. This team's going nowhere. I want to be somewhere where I am more appreciated. And whether his frozen foot or his helmet was the real issue, or whether the team dealt with it badly, I do not know. But what was interesting to me was, in Hard Knocks, they had a receiver called Keelan Doss, who they signed undrafted. And I had him at the very top of the list of undrafted players who had a great shot at making it in the NFL. And Gruden, for the whole of Hard Knocks, kept, hugging him and saying, this is my guy. I love this guy. And then they cut him. So Jacksonville picked him up, put him on the practice squad. And when Brown left, the Raiders called Keelan Doss and said, okay, you want to come back and be on our roster? And he said no. He'd rather stay on Jacksonville's practice squad. That tells me more than anything else about the Antonio Brown thing. It's a thing where they don't necessarily want to come in and play in this zoo. And I think that's what it is. You know, it's like below the surface, but we'll see a lot tonight when Denver go into Oakland and play.
Mike, great having you back. Thanks a million.
Thanks, guys.